a surprising weekend, obviously, in college football. A lot of great upsets. The biggest story, I would say, was more so the almost upset that happened in Austin. Obviously, all the networks were covering it. Alabama travels into the University of Texas, into DKR, and walks away with a 1-point victory when this game was a 3-touchdown betting line. I'm shocked. Kyle was shocked. I'm sure, Blake, you were shocked too at this result. But it was a great effort. Like, one thing I said when I broke this down after the game was the grittiness of the defense was one thing that stood out to me, because that was my biggest thing I wanted to see from them going into the game, was how did their defense match up against Alabama? Obviously, you got 5-star prospects all across the board when you're talking about Alabama, and you have a Heisman winning quarterback. And we saw, unfortunately, a Heisman winning play at the end of that game with Young just able to duck out of the corner blitz. Sad days around here. Watts wasn't able to complete that sack. It would have been the play of the year, probably the play of the century around Texas, and probably would even superseded the Dallas Cowboys in terms of talk around the town. But I would say I was happy with the effort. I mean, I can't be disappointed with the effort. Got some sunburn on my face as a result of it, but I think it was well earned. Started turning a little bit of a tan, so I'm okay with it. Blake, what was your reaction when you saw the game?
Whenever Georgia played Alabama last year and I saw Georgia's defense straight up punch Alabama in the mouth, I said, that's not going to happen for a long time. I was completely shocked I know Georgia's defense last year was one of the best of all time, but Alabama never gets punched in the mouth that hard. And Georgia's defense was just so impressive to me. I was like, this is never going to happen again. Well, ironically, it happens at the beginning of this up next season against Texas. Texas came up and punched Alabama in the mouth, which is really impressive. And I think no one really saw this coming. I want to give a huge shout out to Texas's defensive coordinator. The scheme that they drew up to make Bryce Young uncomfortable. At the beginning of the game, Bryce Young had a horrible QBR. It looked like the entire time, I think he had 70 yards passing in the first half.
Can I touch on that real quick?
He was a complete.
Yeah, just want to jump in. Gary Patterson, I think, has been the biggest addition to the Longhorns this offseason. Ewers was obviously doing well in the first half, but Gary Patterson jumping in to help out on the defensive end, I think has really shown a difference in just the first 2 games.
Yeah, without question. I mean, he was a huge factor. Everyone around that defense was just completely I think, converging onto the ball immediately. The moment anytime any player caught the ball, everyone was converging. I think for a while, aside from Jahmyr Gibbs, I really didn't see an offense for Alabama. They really had nothing. They were just punting the ball to try to get it back on defense. That was the entire game plan at that point. And I was really impressed. I think, without question in my eyes, I think if Quinn Ewers is playing this football game the entire game, I think Texas wins. I think, it was only a matter of time before Ewers is going to get a big play down the field.
Don't tell me
I genuinely believe that. I do believe that.
That's the knife in the heart right there. That's the one that kills me, that I've been thinking about all week since this game. Quinn Ewers' health, the safety that wasn't. There was a DPI call that should have been. Yeah. I know that Alabama was the more penalized team. Don't get me wrong. I know Alabama was the more penalized team, but it always seemed the big calls, the ones that really mattered, that non-safety that I think everyone who's looked at that game, broken down from all different angles, can say that non-safety was the biggest play of the game in hindsight.
Yeah, that was, I remember watching this game live at the moment. I saw the score was close, and I'm like, I got to turn this on. I'm sitting here watching Alabama, Texas in the morning, and watched that play. And I was dumbfounded that they did not end up calling that a safety. I think that they almost looked over it. They called I don't know if it was a targeting call, I think, at the beginning. And then I was like, what in the world? How's that targeting? And then they review it, and then they completely nonchalantly just say the pass is incomplete. There's no targeting. There's no safety or anything. And that just blew my mind. I thought, if anything, they should, review and see if this was a safety or not, because it looked pretty clear to me that he was down before the ball got out. But it is what it is. And I thought there was a lot of moments in this game that Texas could have easily won. Unfortunately, even with the backup quarterback playing, it's just a couple of times, a couple of big referee calls, and a couple of moments where they couldn't make a big field goal or things like that. It just became, too much for them over time. And, it's unfortunate, but it's part of football and it happens a lot. And to end up being on the wrong side of it for Texas.
Yeah, I needed another Auburn to upset Alabama, and I'm talking about the kicker. No longer have Dicker the kicker out there in DKR, which was a disappointment because obviously that field goal missed at the end of half too. Those are probably the 3 big things that I would point to: Ewers' injury, the missed field goal before half, and the non-safety. as the difference makers in the game.
Ooh,
I know
the fourth one I'll throw at you too.
Yeah,
the fourth one is that if not for Alabama, despite the fact that Alabama messed up real bad, if Alabama didn't have an elite goal line defense, one of those field goals turns into a touchdown and Texas wins by 7 points. So as much as Bama like committed a ton of penalties and their offense didn't do well, goal line defense being good for Bama was the only thing that kept them in the game.
The first series with Ewers still in there, or are you talking about the rest of the game with Card?
Both. I mean, Alabama forced 5 field goals and 3 of them were within, I believe, 35 yards. Okay. I might have that wrong, but
because
it was.
I mentioned a DPI that I thought wasn't called in the first series. That was with Ewers in there. And that was the case in which the defender just never turned to look towards the ball. So I thought very much that should have been a call. The rest of the game with Card, it's hard for me to really judge how that Alabama goal line defense was standing up, because at the end of the day, and I appreciate Card's grittiness in that game, but he's an inferior quarterback to Ewers. And I think what Blake was saying, that Ewers could have been the difference maker in that game had he played the rest of it, is 100% accurate. And going to Hudson Card, because we do need to talk about that, because there is a game this week. As fun as the Alabama game was, it wasn't the national championship. We're still just in week 3 now. Now for Texas, it's time to face little brother, University of Texas San Antonio, as the Roadrunners are coming to Austin. 3rd straight home game, which is kind of surprising. Great luck of the draw if you're the Longhorns, but they are perhaps going on their 3rd quarterback at this point. Charles Wright, redshirt freshman, starting for them. It seems very likely because at this time, current moment of recording, Wednesday, Hudson Card had a boot on. Reports out of practice are that he's ramping up, but to go from a boot to playing, I just don't see it. Ewers is out multiple weeks. We're on the 3rd stringer at this point. 12.5-point line against the Roadrunners. Kyle, what do you think of the upcoming matchup?
Well, my favorite moment of the week is when they asked Sark, or I guess one of the better moments for Texas is when they asked Sark about Quinn Ewers' injury. And he's basically like, well, it's not broken, which is never a great comment to come out of any press conference. Is like, what's up with the guy's shoulder? Well, it's not broken, which I guess means he might have a separated shoulder, maybe. I don't know exactly what that means.
I am so unsure of the injury report at this point for Ewers, because I've heard 3 weeks, I've heard 6 weeks, I've heard the season. No one really knows what the injury status of Ewers is for the rest of the year. And it sucks because this would have been his audition year prior to Arch getting on that roster next.
But it's not broken. That's what we know. It's not broken. And
some of those throws, man, just real quick, just some of those throws, they were so good. They were so good too.
He looked like a 5-star or 4.5-star. I mean, depending on how you feel about his senior
Worthy
year.
On the deep pass. I'm going to miss that. I don't know if Charles Wright has that in him.
No, I would assume not. And most thirds, well, other than Cardale Jones, he made an NFL career out of it. But still, I think that the Texas Longhorns are in a weird place where they jumped 55 spots in the rankings despite a loss, which is a college football record. In the history of the AP poll, no one has ever jumped 55 spots just after losing a game. And, very few times ever has someone been in such a position that Texas was against the greatest college football dynasty ever. And the team that's everyone considers the perennial favorite to win the championship. Texas is probably going to win, as much as I love the meat motherfucker UTSA Roadrunners, who were 10-0 last year, but then they fell apart at the end of the season. But as much as I love UTSA, Texas is probably going to win this game and they will survive. And then Texas fans can sweat it out when they get to the games that I feel like matter in terms of measuring stick for them, which is what happens against West Virginia, what happens against Baylor, what happens against Oklahoma State, and of course, what happens in that wonderful Red River rivalry that I believe a couple weeks ago, Juju declared a must-win game for Sark.
I will still stand by that. However, now with the Ewers injury factored in, it does kind of change the math of this season and my expectations, because again, we saw Card run this offense last year, and Card may not be even running it for the next couple of weeks, depending on how this ankle heals up. I don't know how Charles Wright is going to run this offense. I little bit of quick research into Charles Wright. So his senior year out of high school. So again, he's a redshirt freshman. He played a couple games in 2021 for the Longhorns, 2,800 yards, 26 touchdowns as a sophomore. Austin High had a positive touchdown interception ratio. So, I mean, offers out of UTSA, Texas, North Texas. So maybe this is a personal game for him since he had the offer on the table to go to the Roadrunners. Blake, what do you think is going to be the Texas game plan should they be on their third quarterback?
Well, we need to hope and pray that Bijan Robinson steps on this field because he is an animal. And I think, like you said earlier, I think Texas has plenty of fine running backs, but they don't have a difference maker like Bijan Robinson, who I think is, in my opinion, pretty clearly and far and away the best running back in college football right now, talent wise. I think, you look at the blend of pass catching compared to how well he can run on the ground. I mean, this is a freak show. This is an elite running back. And you also have a guy on the outside in Xavier Worthy, who's a really, really good wide receiver, one of the best in the nation as well. I think what you got to do with the backup quarterback is ensure that you can get your two best players the ball at all times and let them get yards after the catch. So giving, Worthy and Bijan Robinson some opportunities in the screen game, I think would be a fantastic idea. Really shortening the offense, letting your quarterback get really, really used to the offense, let them have some easy throws, because you're not going to want to force the ball down the field against the UTSA defense. That's how they win games, is turnovers. We just saw that again with Marshall, Notre Dame. You don't want to do that again. So ensure that you don't turn the ball over, keep the ball in a really, really short field, get the ball to your playmakers like Worthy and Bijan, and hopefully they can get you good yards after the catch. And I think you'd also really need to rely on your offensive line to be able to open up some holes for Bijan as well in the run game. Just being able to keep the ball short, hopefully get a lot of yards after catch, and being able to slowly move the offense, because I mean, I'm not concerned about the defense anymore. If the defense looks like anything they were last week against Alabama, that's a top 10 defense in college football. Not worried at all about that. So as long as their offense can stay up to par and getting the ball to their stars, I don't see a problem. I still think Texas probably wins this game.
I would agree with you on the still think they win this game part. However, I would say I still won't completely buy in, go all in, push all my chips into the middle of the table on the Texas defense just yet, because a game like UTSA, why it is in still way a measuring stick for this program, I would say, is because we've seen them have these great one-off games against high-level competition, like Oklahoma when in Sark's first year, have them down to the wire, almost win that game. And then they come back with kind of a lackadaisical effort the following week. I need to see them break that mentality. And when you're going into a game as almost a 2-touchdown favorite, I think it's easy to do that against a UTSA. And I look at UTSA, obviously last year was a great year for their program, a standout year for their program, got their head coach at an extension, probably got him some look from some bigger universities. Through the early couple weeks here, Houston, they got in a shootout effort with them. That came down to an overtime matchup. And then in week 2, they had to have a come from behind win against Army, which Army and obviously Houston aren't two great programs in itself to be in shootouts with. You just came off a matchup with the number 1 Alabama team. But the fact is, UTSA in those 2 games put up 35 and 41 points. So they can put up offensive showing. So this defense has to come with that same level of intensity, especially if they know that their offense is going to be at a minimal level, because again, Wright, third stringer, even the best case for a third stringer, Cardale Jones, as Kyle mentioned, that's probably unlikely to just be a find on the roster, given the drop off between Ewers and Card was so substantial. I could only imagine the drop off between Ewers and Wright. Now I hope for the best for him, but like you said too, Blake, he does need his full complement out there. He does need a guy like Bijan out there. I think Rashawn Johnson could do a great job if he does have to play. But if you're talking about being down a star quarterback and being down a star running back, ultimately a wide receiver like X-Man, Xavier Worthy, is still dependent on the quarterback position. So you really hope that you could simplify it as much as possible, still put up your normal amount of points, the normal amount of points you should have put up against a group of 5 school like UTSA. Like I'm saying, just keep up that same level of defensive intensity, because if that falls off, then I'll know that this program hasn't changed fully or hasn't fully made that shift. Because again, it's easy to gear up when you're a 3-touchdown underdog. How do you do it when you're a 2-touchdown favorite? That's what I want to see from this Longhorns program going into week 3. Still picking them to win the game. Hook 'em horns. All right, guys, we have another guest joining us this week. Blake Jude. Blake has been on the podcast before. Blake, go ahead and tell the people where they can find you on social media.
I'm everywhere on social media. If you're interested in my Bengals content, which is what I do a lot, got my logo on my own t-shirt here. Follow me on Instagram at StripeHypeCincy, where I post all Bengals content on. But if you want more variety, my Twitter at BlakeJude714. I do pretty much every football there. I'm going to be doing a lot of betting stuff this season in football. I'm going to be keeping up with college football, NFL, all of that. So make sure you follow me on my Twitter for all of that content.
Check out Blake for all Bengals content, all sporting content, great draft analyst as well. Follow us on social media at Slumpbuster Podcast. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the video, and comment about whatever we were talking about in this video. I don't know what it is. This is just going to be a general outro tag. Stay safe, happy, and healthy. Juju Talk Sports. Kyle Ledbetter here. We'll see you next time.